Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast brought to you by BetMGM. This is our Mid-American Conference preview. It's Maction time, baby. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by Mike Iannello and our Mac expert, Stuck, author of the Mac Manifesto. You got to catch it every year. What does that drop? Late October, early November. Just the deepest of dives.
Two of them. Just the two of them. One in the preseason, one midseason.
Stuck, how you doing?
All is well. In full prep mode. Excited to talk Maction. This is always my favorite podcast of the year. Ohio should have got to the window last year for us. If our boy Rourke doesn't get hurt, that one hurt, but we got him to the conference final. And I'm excited to talk Maction. Always a blast.
Yeah, the Maple Missile, his knee is going to be topic that we're going to be watching. I mean, obviously they have CJ Harris as well. He played very well in the bowl game, but if Rourke is a go, they're certainly a team that can win the MAC. Iannello, what are your thoughts on the top teams? Do you view it as really a 2 or 3 team race, or do you think it's more wide open in the MAC?
The MAC's always wide open. Just at it, I do think, I know you disagree. We'll get into it, I'm sure. Stucky's sure. I still think Toledo is the class of the conference, but when's the last time the MAC had a repeat champion? Northern Illinois in
2011.
Yeah. So just inherently, I think Toledo's head and shoulders above everyone else, but there's no chance they win it just because that's how the MAC works. So in that sense, it is wide open because then who else is it going to be is kind of how I look at this conference.
Yeah, there's two golden rules when approaching the MAC is you never bet on the favorite, the preseason favorite. Or I'd usually say the preseason favorite or two. Now, last year, Toledo won it. Really should have lost their division. If Eastern Michigan did a fluky 4th down conversion, they win that. And I'm fully convinced that if Rourke doesn't go down, Ohio beats Toledo and these teams were 15-1. I had a Ball State one from a couple of years ago. They were, I think, 14-1. And then I also say I never take under the lowest totals. So Kent State, well, I'm sure we'll talk about them. Their total's 2.5. They're gonna suck. They're gonna be the worst team in the country, I think. They have no returning starters on offense. Zero. It's a brand new, everything is starting over. But you just luck into wins in the MAC. I'm not going under 2.5 on any team in the MAC ever. I'm sorry. And I think Kent State is gonna be horrifying. But you'll have there's no depth, so you can play a team that's just completely hurt. They play CCSU at home and Bowling Green at home, and then they play Northern Illinois at home in the finale. Northern Illinois could have something, they could have everything wrapped up. They could be playing for nothing. Just no thanks. It's under or nothing with Kent State, but one of my general rules is I never go under on these MAC teams just because crazy shit happens.
Stuck to your point about Toledo winning last year as the favorite. Yeah, I had Toledo as the favorite last year. I had a ticket on them. It was still plus 400.
Yeah,
they're down to plus 170 this year, which is nuts for the MAC.
And you have Ohio down to plus 270, which a year ago today, we were touting them on this podcast, and they were at some spots they were 20-1. If they came down to, I think, 12-1 or so, 14-1, but now they're at plus 270. No thanks on Ohio, especially with the questions. They have some other questions, but especially with the questions with Rourke's knee injury for the MAC, which we'll talk about today. I'm looking in the second tier for potential futures. Is where my head is.
So you guys mentioned Toledo and Ohio at the top of the board. Let me run through the rest of the odds to win this conference. Miami of Ohio 8-1, Buffalo 9-1, as well as Eastern Michigan at the same price. Then it starts to get a little spicy. Northern Illinois, 17-1, Central, 30-1, Akron, 35, Ball State, 40-1, Bowling Green, 45-1, and the aforementioned Kent State Golden Flashes, 200-1, may as well be 200,000-1. They're not winning this conference. But let's get into it. Let's start in the East. Ohio, huge turnaround last year. Tim Albin goes 3-9 in year 1 and then 10-4 in year 2, 7-1 in conference play. Their win total is set up at 7.5. They return 3/4 of their offensive line starts, basically a wash in terms of net TARP. They're plus 4.5 on offense, minus 5 on defense, 14 returning starters in total, plus their punter. Pro Football Focus loves them. They got 5 first-team All-MAC players on the PFF team. As we mentioned, Curtis Rourke or CJ Harris early in the season. Hopefully Rourke is healthy and that knee holds up, because the rest of the offense is, I think, ready to go. Bangura behind a strong offensive line. Sam Wiglis, almost 75 catches last year, 900 yards, 11 TDs. He's somebody who can help them downfield when teams load the box to stop the run. Their secondary could be much improved. Lots of experience in their front 7 was lost, which is a bit of an issue because they were top 50 against the run last year. And then it gets interesting from a non-conference perspective when you zero in on the win total, because they open at San Diego State. It's a winnable game. That's about a 3-point spread there. That they're at FAU, a team that I'm high on the road. And then they get to host Iowa State in Athens, which is a very interesting game. No Toledo on the schedule, but they do get Miami of Ohio at home. So I'll kick it to you first, Stuck. What are your thoughts on the Bobcats, a team that you were a year early on? You were the one banging the drum saying this team was going to put it together, and they did for a double-digit win season in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, last year was the year to really get on them. I still love Rourke, but there's injury questions. I still have some other questions specifically on their defense. One of the reasons I loved them last year is they hired the defensive coordinator from Miami of Ohio, who I really liked, and I thought he would turn around the defense. You got to remember, 2 years ago, let's go 3 years ago, Ohio was like 4-1 to win the MAC. And then, the following year, they have a coaching shakeup like late in the summer. It was a mess. Like, it was just everything went wrong that year. And they were kind of undervalued going into last year, in my opinion. I think the offense will be good as long as Rourke is healthy. You do have Harris there, so there is some depth. You get Allison back from injury in the backfield as well. And they had a lot of injuries on the offensive line last year, so better health there, you would assume, and the offense should cook. But I am worried about the defense. Lose a couple key pieces in the secondary and up front. Lose a key kicker as well, which that can swing a lot of these close MAC games. And they were 4-1 in one-possession games last year. It's a really easy overall schedule because they host Miami, which is huge for the division, but home field advantage, a little overrated in the MAC, or it's one of the lowest besides the Sun Belt in all of college football over the past 20 years. They get Western Michigan, Central Michigan, NIU from the West. And then you also get to play Western Michigan, Akron, and Kent, which is huge. Those are the 3 worst teams in the conference, in my opinion. I think their win total is close to about right. It'll probably come down to one of these non-conference games if I had to guess. At San Diego State, winnable game. At Florida Atlantic, I like Florida Atlantic too. We'll talk about them on the next podcast. But winnable game. Iowa State, they're hosting Iowa State, which is, I love when Power Fives because it goes to a MAC school. But we don't know what Iowa State's going to look like. There's still pending what's going to happen with all their gambling investigations. So I'm not going under or over. I think the win total is about right. Ohio definitely has a shot to win its first MAC title since 1968, which is crazy. But I'll be fading them indirectly, so I do think they're a tad overvalued. I wish we got them last year if only Rourke didn't go down. But those are my quick thoughts on Ohio.
So it sounds like a pass from Stuck here just because of the potential issues with Rourke's knee and, a few new faces in the front 7. We'll see how they react to that. In my opinion, I think the play here is over 7.5. I don't like the value in terms of winning the MAC outright. I know. Can you kind of break the tie here? We got kind of a pass, a slight lean from me. Where are you on the Bobcats?
Yeah, this is going to be boring, but I'm a pass too. I like them as a team. It's just, my kind of natural instinct is they were like every gambler's darling last year. They paid off so well. So that inherently scares me going into this year. I think the offense should be fine. You mentioned it. Rourke's back, but the ACL, it seems like he'll be ready to start for the season. So I'm actually not as concerned about Rourke's health, at least at the start of the year. Bangura's back, top receivers back. You said 4 of the 5 offensive linemen's back, including their stud center. I'll let you say his name, Breeze. To me, the cool storyline watching this year is Curtis needs 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns to pass his brother Nathan for second in school history. He'll have to do those. He'll have to break those records for them to have any success this year. You mentioned their pass defense was horrendous, so that kind of makes me a little nervous too. And like Stock said, they're 4-1 in one position games. They were 8th in the country in turnover margin. So they kind of got lucky. They kind of had everything break their way, obviously, until Rourke gets hurt. So that makes me nervous. Stock mentioned this might come down to the non-con. I agree. If you listen to our Mountain West podcast, I played Ohio +4 against San Diego State. I think they win that game. So that's kind of how I'm kind of splitting difference with both of you. I'm staying away like stock, but I also kind of lean over with you. I'm just going to play them against San Diego State. I think if they beat them in that game, which I think they do, they hit their over. So I'll take my money right off the bat.
All right, next up in the MAC East, Miami of Ohio, 6-7 last year, 4-4 in conference play. Their win total is set at 6.5, but you got to pay some heavy juice, -170 to the over. They return 55% of their O-line starts, +4 in the net tarp, +3.5 on D alone, 12 returning starters, both specialists, as Stuck likes to bring up. It's nice to have that continuity there. If we talked about the Maple Missile staying healthy, can we talk about Brett Gabbert? Because when he was healthy in 2021, 26 passing TDs against just 6 picks. He only plays in 4 games last year with a broken collarbone. They've given him some added pieces on the perimeter. Joe Wilkins from the portal out of Notre Dame. Gage Larvadane comes in from Southeast Louisiana and could really help in the slot and the return game. Defense is rock solid by MAC standards. They return 7 starters. And I love the road schedule. When you look at the games that are gettable away from home, at UMass, at Kent, at Western, at Ohio, which is the most difficult game there, but at Ball State. So I look at 4 of those 5 there as games that the Redhawks certainly can win. And I think the bottom line from a pricing perspective and value, I don't want to pay the -170 over here. I'm maybe a little bit interested in them if they keep him healthy all year at 8-1 when we talk about skipping over the 2 favorites at the top of the conference. I'll start with INLO here. What are your thoughts on Gabbert staying healthy for the first time and seemingly forever, and the Redhawks putting it together under Chuck Martin?
You mentioned exactly. This is my pick to win the MAC because I like the value at +750, +800. You're basically just betting Gabbert is healthy. In my opinion, he's the best quarterback in the MAC if he's healthy. They lose Mac Hippenhammer, but Miles Marshall's back. You mentioned they bring in Joe Wilkins. They bring in both their running backs. They have Kevin Davis back. Kevin Davis, one of those cool like half running back, half receiver hybrids that they use really well. I think Miami, Toledo. You could argue Miami has the best defense in the conference. They led the conference in scoring D and rush D last year. Returned 9 starters. I think they're going to be great against the run again. Austin Ertl, Kobe Hilton up front. Matthew Salapak in the middle is just a stud linebacker. So you mentioned it, and Miami's bugaboo, basically the entire, the last couple of years under Chuck Martin, has been they've struggled on the road. And there's every year to do it. Their road games this year are so easy. It's like they have to get that monkey off their back. They have to learn how to win on the road. And this year sets up for them to do that. So I think you're getting basically +800 that Gabbert stays healthy, because for my money, if he does, they win the East, and then you have that conference title against Toledo game. So the Miami Ohio is my pick to win the MAC. That is what I'm taking for my conference title future.
It would have been easy last year in Oxford to just pack it up, when Gabbert got hurt. I think the fact that they got to 6 wins is actually a pretty good coaching job by Martin. Do you agree, Stuck? Or do you think this is a team that kind of is just stuck in that second tier and can't quite push all the way to the top of the conference?
No, I agree. I will have Miami futures as well. And like if you look last year, kind of Miami and Ohio kind of flipped positions. And I think now Ohio is a little overvalued. Last year, Miami, look, and I brought this up last year. I said, look, there's going to be major questions on the defense. You had massive turnover up front, and you lost your defensive coordinator. You're basically bringing everyone back up front and at linebacker outside of who did lose McWood. But now you have more continuity, more experience returning. I think the defense is fine. You do have to have just someone step up as the guy in to replace Hippenhammer, but that's marginal. I think there are guys there that can do that. And yeah, when Miami of Ohio was the favorite, then I was saying, look, Gabbert in his health has been a question, but now at 8-1, willing to take that risk. And yeah, I love the schedule. They do draw Toledo from the West, but they also get Western Michigan and Ball State. And yeah, their road games are very winnable. One of the reasons why that they're not as high up is that they do have to go to Ohio, but it's a bus ride. I mean, it's a couple hour bus ride to Ohio. Like I said, Mac home field isn't great. They have struggled on the road for whatever reason, but they have great home games here. Yeah, I think you're buying no interest in the win total. You're buying the upside of Gabbert staying healthy. I agree on the Miami Redhawks' future, and I like their special teams. Could swing a couple games here or there.
All right, up next is Buffalo. Finished 7-6 last year, 5-3 in conference play. Their win total sitting at 6. Over 60% of their O-line starts return. They're -1 on the TARP. That's on the defensive side of the ball. Only 10 starters returning, but both specialists. The O-line has basically all juniors and seniors there. They got a starting senior quarterback. They got Cook at running back, a senior as well. I think they'll be fine, even working in 3 new receivers on the perimeter. The defense by Max standards is very solid, and I love Sean Dolek at linebacker, and Marcus Fuqua was an interception machine at safety. He could be the defensive player of the year in this conference. I'm not interested in them winning this thing outright, but their win total is interesting to me because when I look through and, last summer when we talked about this, you really want to look at those coin flip games, those winnable games. How many do you have on your schedule? They have a lot. I mean, Fordham in the opener, that's a win. Liberty at home and a new coach. We talked about the quarterback situation at Liberty. If it's Jonathan Bennett, I think Buffalo can win that game. They go to Louisiana, to Akron. They get Central at home, Bowling Green at home, at Kent, Eastern Michigan. That sounds like a lot of games that they potentially could win. So I lean towards the over on this total of 6. It's probably a pass for me, but I think this is one of the more interesting teams from a variance perspective because of the schedule. I could see them going 4-8 or 8-4. Am I seeing the field properly with the Bulls here stuck?
I have no interest in this team. It's under nothing. I've heard a lot of love for Buffalo from some others, but I'm not a Cole Snyder guy. If you look at like his turnover worthy throw rate, he was getting pretty lucky last year, and Buffalo got pretty lucky overall in the turnover department. I think their losses at receiver and tight end are significant. I mean, Marshall, Williams, Gasson, their top 2 tight ends. You do have a couple freshmen that were redshirt freshmen on the offensive line who come back. So the offensive line should be better, but you lose your 2 starting DNs, and yes, Fuqua's a stud, but they had heavy losses elsewhere in the secondary. I don't like their offensive coordinator hire. You only bring back 10 starters, and you got zero FBS starters in the portal. You're relying on a lot of JUCO, community college, FCS guys. I don't like this Buffalo team. They also lost the cross-division schedule lottery. They got at Toledo, who I believe is coming off of a bye. They also get Eastern Michigan and Central Michigan. That's pretty brutal. You get Kent State and Akron, but both are on the road. And you have to go to Miami of Ohio, to Toledo. It's under or nothing for me for Buffalo. I don't think I am quite there yet from a numbers perspective to bet it, but I do think that they're overvalued, which is lending more value to Miami of Ohio.
All right, so we got a pass and an under. INLO, you going to break the tie here?
Yeah, I'm stuck. I like this under. I've already bet this under. I'm stuck. I don't really love Cole Snyder. I don't think his turnover plays are concerning, and they lose Matt Myers, who's been there for a while. He was their backup, so they kind of lose that depth there. Ron Cook and Mike Washington are back at running back, but they lose all of their receivers. Their most experienced receiver caught 17 passes last year. And when Buffalo had success was with, just running the ball every play with Jarrett Patterson, and they kind of throw the ball a little more, and they haven't really been as successful running the ball ever since basically Leipold left. Yeah, their defense, they bring back 2 all-MAC players, but they lose linebacker James Patterson, who has been the heart and soul of this defense for like 15 years. So I think that's a huge loss, not only in the middle.
This is the first time in like 2 decades there's not a Patterson on this defense.
Seriously. And he was so important to that locker room and in the middle of the field. I think that's a big loss. They also need to replace both their offensive and defensive coordinators. And my biggest takeaway was I was listening to one of Stuck and Colin's podcasts where Colin you guys talked about the idea of success rate being less important nowadays because most teams play that bend don't break style. Buffalo basically does the opposite. They're pretty good on a down and down basis, but they give up a ton of chunk plays and they're not explosive at all. They just kind of move the ball steadily, but they can't pick up big plays, which is kind of what teams, that's how they play to stop that. So I don't love Buffalo. I actually disagree with you, Breeze. I think the schedule is hard. Like I think at Wisconsin, home versus Liberty, who you love. I think at Louisiana is a tough game. You mentioned they go to Toledo, to Miami. I think that there's a chance they start 1-3. So to me, 6-6 does kind of seem like the most likely outcome. So I bet under 6.5 here. They also had a weird end of the year last year. They started off pretty good, and then they lost 3 of their last 4 down the stretch and barely beat Akron to make a bowl game, and they looked horrible in that game. So I did not like the way they finished the year, and I'm not sold on this team.
Another team with kind of a middling win total is Bowling Green. They went to a bowl. They got showed up by New Mexico State. 6-7 on the year, 5-3 in conference. 2/3 of their O-line starts to return, plus 1.5 in the net tarp, but only 8 returning starters in their punter. Lots of new faces on offense, including a brand new backfield. Could be Camden Orth or Connor Bazelak from Mizzou. Defense wasn't great last year, and they only returned 4 starters. But I'll pose this question to you, Stuck. With all of this being said, how the hell did they beat Toledo and drop 42 on them last year? It's still, I understand it's MAC and anything can happen, but that's still one of the biggest head scratchers for me of 2022. Was that absolutely just a flash in the pan, or is there something that Bowling Green can try to build on in this season for one of the best wins in the MAC last year?
I mean, we just talked about Buffalo. Buffalo was down like 21 to Toledo in like the fourth quarter and came back and won. I mean, that's just what happens in the MAC. You're going to have these random games, which is why I'm petrified to go under
also,
these really.
Daquan Finn didn't play in that game.
Yeah, which this Bowling Green team, I'm still not a fan of their roster. I'm not a fan of their coaching staff. You lose McDonald at quarterback, bring in Bazelak, who was previously at Indiana, Missouri. Maybe he can, elevate his game because he's playing now against inferior competition. That's what you hope. I'm not a huge Bazelak guy. Get Stewart back after sitting out a year, but it's still an unproven wide receiver group. Maybe your offensive line can be better because that's really been a problem over the past couple of years. They've been super young. You lose a defensive end of the NFL, like that's a huge loss on a team like Bowling Green and their nose tackle. And then the secondary losses are pretty significant. And I think they regress on the special team side. They were really lucky on the special teams. They got a couple like punt block touchdowns. They're gonna have a freshman kicker now. And then last year, look, they went 5-2 in 1 possession games. They faced 4 backup quarterbacks. You draw Toledo at Western Michigan and Ball State from the West, mixed bag there. You do have 3 straight road games in the middle of your schedule. I lean under here with Bowling Green, especially if you can get a 5. Not a fan of this team. Again, when you look at the East, it's like, I think Ohio, love Rourke, but I think they're overvalued. I'm not a fan of this Buffalo team, not a fan of this Bowling Green team. Then we're going to talk about Akron and Kent State. I think Akron, it's like on the come up, it's close, it's on the precipice, but they're still not, I don't think, capable of winning the conference. And then Kent State's arguably the worst team in the country. All of that.
Spoiler alert, you're not going to bully me to betting Akron to win the conference again this year?
Look, if Akron won some 1 possession games last year, who knows? So, yeah, I mean, all that, it just leads back to Miami, Ohio having value to me.
What do you think, Ainello? Or because I'm going under on this team.
I should say I bet under here.
There we go. All right. So that's 2 under bets. Can we make it 3?
I'm gonna have to. I was gonna just pass but my only pause is that, I mean, what I think of Matt McDonald. So Bazelak's probably an upgrade from him. I do have a little bit of there's a little bit of maybe Bazelak has like a Rocky Lombardi type season and is way better at this level than we think and leads into a MAC title game. But at the end of the day, I don't think Bowling Green's well coached at all. So
yep.
I'll certainly take an under before and over. And yeah, if you guys are both on it, I might have to just align the clans and take it with you guys.
All right, we were just talking about the Zips. Let's get into it. They went 2-10 last year, 1-7 in the conference. Their win total set at 3.5, juiced -160 if you want to go over. Over 70% of their O-line starts are back, -1 in the net tarp, 10 returning starters. Yes, we were a year early on the Jomo bandwagon, but were we really? Because when you look at it, yeah, they won 2, but down the stretch, 7-point loss to Central, 6-point loss to Kent, 6-point loss to Eastern, 1-point loss at Buffalo. And I really like what they have coming back in the backfield. DJ Irons is someone who had 3 games of over 300 yards passing, including a 100-yard rushing game against Bowling Green. Lorenzo Lingard, he's been one of those Carmen Sandiego players. He's been all over the map, but he was a former Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Florida. That is a really high ceiling skill position player to have at running back with an experienced line in front of him. The defense, in my opinion, could take a jump into the top 100 and be competitive because of their experienced secondary. Bubba Arslanian, hopefully I'm going to say that right, all-conference centerpiece at linebacker. He's so much fun to watch. If you go on YouTube, he actually has a highlight tape set to Good Vibrations. I don't know exactly why that was the musical accompaniment, but it's a jam, and he's got the look of like a 90s linebacker. He's got the restrictor plate behind his helmet. He was 5th in the nation with 129 tackles last year. I really like him. And then when we get into the actual schedule, there's winnables all over the schedule. They're at Temple, which I think is an interesting opener. They're going to be obviously a dog there, but I wouldn't be shocked if DJ Irons plays a clean game from a turnover perspective if they're in it in the fourth quarter. A win against Morgan State at home. They get Buffalo at home. They're at Central. They're at Bowling Green, and they get Kent at home. So breaking that down, those are 6 games they potentially could win. Could they go 4-2 in that slate? I'm going to bet yes. I'm on this team. I think they were close to breaking through to win 3 or 4 games last year. I think they're going to do it this time and get to 4 or 5, flirt with bowl eligibility. I'll start with you, Ianello. I know that Joe Moorhead is a big part of your Penn State fanhood, and the offense at times uneven. It was year 1. I understand there was a lot of moving pieces in the portal last year and this year. Are you bullish again on Akron?
I am. And by the way, people always ask, oh, why do you gamble and why do we do these win total futures and having, your money tied up all year? It's so at the end of the year, you can be screaming at your TV for an Akron Buffalo game because you have Akron over 2.5 wins and you've been sweating it for 8 months, and it all comes down to a game against Buffalo. And it was electric, even though it lost.
They should have won. Should have won. By the way, that's another shot at Buffalo playing Akron in the finale. Like, it was like an afternoon game that got rescheduled.
Yeah, Buffalo
and
needed
they needed that game for bowl
nothing.
eligibility, and Akron should have won that game. They lost by 1. Buffalo came back, a miracle win, and Akron lost another 1 possession game. They went 1-5 in 1 possession games last year.
Yeah, I first of all, I'm big on DJ Irons. If he moves around a lot, so he does get banged up, but 6'6", 215 pounds, he's a tank. And what Stuck mentioned for Buffalo, not bringing in Power 5 guys, like that's kind of all Joe Moorhead does. They bring back from last year all MAC wide receiver Alex Adams, who's a former LSU guy, Daniel George from Penn State. Just looking down the list of transfers, I'm not gonna pretend I know if these guys are good or not, but you see, running back from Florida, quarterback from West Virginia, running back from Arizona, linebacker from Illinois, cornerback from South Carolina, safety from Pitt. Like, I love seeing that on MAC school teams. You mentioned the guys they brought back. Defensive line is still a concern. Offensive line is still kind of a concern. But I do like what Akron's building. They signed Joe Moorhead to a contract extension after 2 wins, which tells you they believe in what he's doing. They want to give him time. That's why he's getting transfers, because they know he has the commitment from the school. I'm with you. I'm all in on the Zips again. I think Joe Moorhead is such, like, talking about Bowling Green, like, Joe Moorhead is such a better coach. So I'm always going to side with Joe Mo.
Yeah, it's. The opener is so key. Yeah, I'll kick it to you, Stuck, in terms of that opener against former MAC school Temple. It's interesting to me that they have an opportunity there, and it could be such a pivotal win as it relates to their win total. Do you think they're a live dog in that game against a Temple team that really needs EJ Warner to progress off of how he played down the stretch last year? But I still think Temple is another team that's going to be in that 3, 4, 5 win window when it comes to the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, it wouldn't be. It's not out of the question that they can win that game, and I agree. I like it's over or nothing with Akron. I mean, they're going to be what? They're over a touchdown underdog at Temple. So, I mean, you assume it's a loss, but it's not. Probably what, 8, 9, 10. I forget what the line is. But it's not certainly a game that they can win. It's not like Temple has this great home field advantage anyway. But then you get Morgan State at home the next week, which should be a win. Buffalo, Northern Illinois at home, at Bowling Green. They've been another game they should have won last year, but they've owned Bowling Green lately. It's the only team they could beat in the recent years. You got Kent State at home. That should be a win. And then, they didn't win the cross-division lottery because you get NIU at EMU at CMU from the West. But there's enough winnable games on here, even though they'll only be favored in probably 2, maybe 3. They also have Ohio at home in the finale. Could be important if Ohio has everything locked up. We saw this with Toledo last year. Toledo basically benched everyone in the final 2 games, and you see that in the MAC a lot. So that could be a free win if Ohio has everything locked up by the finale. But yeah, I mean, you could just see it over the last couple of years, especially last year. This team is getting closer. Just look at the margin of victory. They were 1-5 in 1 possession games. They're much more competitive. Their defense also improved a lot late in the year. you would hope what this is going to come down to. I know they lost Jacques Louis, their stud receiver, but they have enough talent at the skill positions. Lingard's a huge get, especially after Price went down with an injury. And I like Irons. It's just going to come down to the offensive line. The offensive line has been so bad for so long, but they were so young, and there was a lot of shuffling around and injuries last year. And you would hope in year 2 of this system that they're going to be a little bit better. If some of the transfers in the secondary hit, and then, the D-line is a concern. But, I think that this team is getting closer and should get very close, if not to a bowl this year. So, it's over 4. I agree.
I'll tell you what, you guys are talking about Temple. Every year we see a MAC team go upset a Power 5 school. Akron could beat Indiana.
Yeah, Indiana's bad. I don't know if they could win that game, but it wouldn't shock me. It's like that's the team you want to play from Power 5.
Yeah, but if you get Akron plus 10, I'll take that all day.
You'll get more than that.
I know that we said this is not an under podcast as it relates to the MAC, but we got to talk about Kent. 5-7 last year, 4-4 in conference play. Their win total set at 2.5. Only 41% of their O-line starts back. -12 in the net tarp. -7 on offense alone. That's tied worst nationally for overall losses in tarp and offensive losses. They returned just 5 starters in total, all on defense, both specialists. This is possibly the worst team in America. Let's just call it what it is. It's a restart on offense, no starters. Run defense was the only thing that was halfway passable last year, and they lose 3 of their 4 starters on the D-line. They absolutely could beat Central Connecticut State. As an FCS fan, I can tell you the Blue Devils are not good, but they could lose every other game. And they open at Central Florida, at Arkansas, so not exactly a confidence boost there. This team is horrific. This team is probably going to go, I'll say 1-11, 2-10. So I am going to play the under here for a little bit, but I don't know. This is just kind of the ugly side of the transfer portal. They lose their head coach. He's now the OC with Prime in Boulder, running their offense for the Buffaloes, and Colin Schlee off to UCLA. Where did Marquez Cooper end up? Ball State. So I don't know. There's nothing good to say about this team. All their best players have new jerseys on this fall. I'll start with you, Ianello. Is there anything I'm missing? Any reason, schematically, new position players getting opportunities, anything I'm missing on the Golden Flashes?
I mean, the one nice thing I wrote down that we could at least say something positive is, all 3 of us have Pennsylvania ties. Their offensive coordinators are both PA guys. So at least, football towns. But I'm with you, dude. I agree with Stuckey. We're like, I don't know if I have the stomach to bet an under 2.5 wins on a MAC school because I'll just be like nervous every Tuesday night. But this team is going to be garbage. We just talked about the Akron team last year that won 2 games. They beat this team by 20. Like, unless I'm missing something, they have 0 returning starters on offense. Has that ever happened before? Like, ever? I find that hard. I mean, that's like almost impossible to do. So I'm with you. I think they're the worst team in the country by a long shot. I'd love to see them play UMass just so we can see somewhat of a competitive game. But I think they're horrific, and they'll be lucky to win 2 games. So I don't know if I have the stomach to play it, but I certainly like them to go under.
All right, Stuck, what do you think of Kent's?
Yeah, I mean, I can't bet the other 2.5, but it's under or nothing. They're going to be awful. They're 120-1 to win the MAC, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, they got a decent running back room, even though they lost their Cooper intra-conference. I mean, Williams comes back from injury. That's about it. I mean, they lost everything else. They got a brand new pass catchers, brand new coordinator, brand new offensive line. They have 5 career starts. You're probably going to get like one of the transfers that starts at quarterback because Colin Schlee leaving. I don't get why he left. I mean, it's a nightmare situation, but he's going to be buried at UCLA. You're moving to a 4-man front with D, and on defense, and you lose West, Davis, Gamble. You lose your top 2 tacklers from the linebacker unit. You lose Montre Miller and 2 safeties. I'll say another good thing is they got this freshman kickoff specialist. They couldn't kick it off last year, so they would score, and the other team would start at midfield. So it was ridiculous. So they might be able to a little better, but they're not going to score, so it doesn't even matter what their kickoff specialist does, except the beginning of the game. Yeah, they're awful, but probably beat Central Connecticut State, and then if these MAC teams have no depth, which is another, and they're a lot closer than you think. That's another reason why these long shots can win. These favorites, you lose your quarterback, you're fucked. They're playing Northern Illinois at home in the finale. Like if Rocky Lombardi is hurt, like they could win that game. If Northern Illinois is playing for nothing, like they still do play Akron, Bowling Green at home, at Ball State, Buffalo at home. I'm not a fan of. Like just weird shit happens. I'm not touching under 2.5, but it's under nothing. This team's awful.
Quick question.
I do like.
Talk about them anymore.
Sorry, go ahead. I know.
Just speaking of Colin Schley, I don't know if you've done your Pac-12 prep, right? He can't possibly actually be in this quarterback competition. I keep hearing his name. There's no chance he's their quarterback.
It's now a 2-man race. Yeah, it's Garbers and then Dante Moore. Yeah.
I mean, all the caveats that Stuck just threw out, I think that's becoming the running joke in this podcast. Like, if the team already has bowl eligibility locked up and they don't play their starters, if they get snowed in on the tarmac and they get there right before game time, or if their quarterback gets in a car accident, like a lot of things have to happen for Kent to even be in games in the fourth quarter against, FBS teams. So, yeah, I'm sticking to it. I'm going to go under. I don't mind. I haven't done this all that often, so I'll sweat it out on Tuesday and Wednesday nights in November, and hopefully they don't burn me because, this team is just really bad. And sometimes I want to go in the opposite direction. I'm a pretty positive guy, but this team just doesn't have it. Speaking of not being all that positive, I'm going to try to poke some holes in the West Division favorite, the favorite to win the whole conference. That's Toledo. Stucky's got the shirt on for the Rockets here. They went 9-5 last year. They went 5-3, a little bit underperformed in the regular season in the MAC. They end up winning the MAC Conference Championship game 17-7 against the backup quarterback. Their win total set at 8.5. Their offensive line is elite, and they return 85% of their O-line starts. They're +6 in the net TARP, which is the best in the conference, +3 on both sides of the ball. 15 starters returning and their punter. When you factor in the experience, upfront blocking, when you look at Finn's legs, when you look at the running back room that's loaded, Stewart, Boone, Kelly, a lot of things really to love. But then you look towards their schedule last year, the last 4 games, what was happening? They lose to Bowling Green in a shootout. Then they muster 14 points at Western in a loss. I understand that they were like saving players and Gleason's in for some of these games. They only score 17 against Ohio in the MAC title game and just 21 in the bowl game. And when you look at Finn, who his name gets thrown around a lot as a great dual threat quarterback and one of the best in the G5. If you take out his monster game against Kent State, the rest of his stats for the year, 17 TDs, 12 picks. They lose 3 big talents in their front 7. They're still year over year constantly undercandled, the most talented roster top to bottom in this conference. And their defense could be special against the pass. Mitchell and Hook in the secondary both could be first team all MAC. So I'm just looking at it. It's absolutely a pass for me in terms of +170 to win the MAC. That's ridiculous. And then 8.5, I don't know. It's a little rich for my blood. It's a pass. I just think that this team, there's something missing. Maybe there's like an edge to them missing something. They don't have that killer instinct where they came up flat multiple times. For that team last year to lose 5 games is kind of troubling to me. I'll go to you first here, Stuck. I know that you've, railed against Candle for underperforming in the past. Do you think that this is just way out of whack in terms of value, the way that they're being priced?
That you answered your own question. Why do they lose these games? Like 2 years ago, they lost like 5 games as like touchdown plus favorites. I'm wearing a Toledo shirt, by the way. It's Jason Candle. He's awful. I'm not a fan of him. They have the best team talent-wise by far, but Candle will hold them back. He almost did last year, but they just got really lucky. They got lucky that in that Eastern Michigan game, and they got lucky that Ohio didn't have their quarterback in the MAC title game. It was the MVP of the league. Otherwise, they would have disappointed again. And yeah, +170 on the MAC. No, thank you. Over 8.5, -145. It's basically close to a 9. With numbers wise, I'm right in line. So I'm not betting either way. They do have a pretty easy schedule too. Although they do have 3 straight road games and they have a late bye, which might not serve them well. And they do draw Buffalo, Bowling Green, and Miami out of the East, mixed bag. But that 3rd straight road game is at Miami. And so maybe Miami can get them, which would be a huge game. Obviously they're not in the same division, but just for Miami to pick up that game. So look, they're very talented. They're the best team overall, power ratings wise. I do think Finn is a little inconsistent. And I think their defensive line will take a step back. I mean, losing Johnson and to the NFL and Hines is definitely a big loss. maybe Ford will be healthy, the Missouri edition, but their defense is going to be good. They're good. And look, their special teams are a mess last year. I love the hire there, Pete Lembo disciple. So maybe I had them as a bottom 5 special teams unit last year. So maybe that improves. But yeah, I mean, I'm fading this team with someone else in the division and hoping Candle does what he usually does, and they underperform and drop a couple games that they should win as touchdown plus double-digit favorites.
Some head-scratching losses last year. How do you answer that if you're Toledo? I'll kick it to you, Ianello. Like, what do they need to do? Is it just from the shoulders up? It's just a mental thing? Because clearly it can't just be the personnel. The personnel, looking through the experience, the talent, the stars, what they do in the transfer portal, like it all makes sense for them to be the best team, but they haven't played like it. I think you're on mute there, but
you're mute.
Yeah, you almost wonder if their talent like hurts them, if they like go into every game knowing they're better and knowing they should win, and that's what like they don't have that like prove people wrong underdog mentality where you're scrapping and clawing. They just come out flat all the time, and it's frustrating. And you guys mentioned it. What based on what they're bringing back, like to me, they're so clearly the best team in this conference. They're head and shoulders power ratings wise above everyone else. I have a hard time imagining anybody else winning the East or the West. That's why I was looking, at Miami in the East and stuff. But I teased at the beginning of the show. We haven't had a repeat MAC champion since, that 2011-12 Northern Illinois team under Dave Doran. And the same team hasn't even reached the conference title game in 7 years. So the Mackiness of the MAC kind of makes me an auto fade of Toledo. As good as I think they are, it's just weird stuff happens on Tuesday nights, and the best team doesn't always win, especially when the best team's Toledo. So yeah, I'm not gonna like bet they're under or anything, but I'm certainly not betting on them.
So we're pretty much in lockstep on our thoughts on Toledo to pass on essentially both their numbers to win it and then their win total, because their schedule is very workable. Here's a team that maybe we can have a bit of disagreement on. Eastern Michigan, I think we were maybe consensus a little bit bullish on them last year. They go 9-4, 5-3 in conference. Their win total set at 7.5. Fewer than 50% of their line starts return, though. Negative 6.5 in the TARP, negative 7 on offense alone, which is tied for worst nationally. 11 returning starters in total, both specialists. I'm out on them this year after the great run they had last year. I love Chris Creighton. I think he's one of the best coaches in all of college football. When you look at what he accomplished to get him to 9 wins, to get him a bowl victory, what he did with Taylor Powell, really bringing the best out of him, but they also lose City Sow up front. Samson Evans returns, but is he going to be running into a loaded box week after week? Because that's the question on offense. On defense, Jose Ramirez was an NFL draft prospect that I was really high on. He's a huge loss on the edge. He was very disruptive, lots of TFLs. The defense could still be top half of the MAC, based on what they're bringing back, but I have questions in terms of their offense. And also, the schedule is workable. So I think 7.5, I have them at 6.9 for my projection. So I'm leaning towards the under. But they got Howard, UMass, at Jacksonville State in the non-conference. They got to win all those, because they also draw, when you look at some of their conference road games, at Toledo, at NIU, at Buffalo. I'm talking myself into it. I'm going to go under here. Maybe this is the first time we have some serious disagreement on the podcast. I'll go first to you, Ianello. I know you were flying high with the Eagles as well last year.
Yeah, I'm torn because I like this team. I love Chris Creighton, but I'm certainly not betting the under. I think the number is right. I struggle to find a lean either way. You mentioned they bring back Samson Evans. I think for my money he's probably the best running back in the conference with Carson Steele gone. They lose Taylor Powell, but I think Austin Smith will be fine. He started 4 games last year. He also came in the middle of the game and helped them beat Arizona State last year. I mean, he basically got Herm Edwards fired with that performance. Their leading receivers back. You mentioned City Sow is obviously a big loss, Jose Ramirez, but the defense brings back most of their secondary, and they were really good against the pass last year. So I think that'll be a strength again. I'm worried about the run defense a little bit, but yeah, like I said, I'm torn. I like them. I'm not taking the under, but I think the number's about right.
Two extremes here, Stuck. Do you think Eastern can actually compete with Toledo, or is this a year to play them on the under?
Yeah, last year my futures were EMU and Ohio. They were like around 15-1, I think, that you could find when we did the podcast for both. Really came Eastern Michigan came so close to winning the division. Would have been both in the championship, which would have been awesome. But now they're 9-1. I think they're worse off. They're worse in the trenches for sure, and their defensive line is definitely going to take a step back. You lose Ramirez, also Crawford, and I think they're really going to miss their defensive coordinator. It was the longest tenured defensive coordinator in the country, and some of their losses at receiver too. I was a Powell over Smith guy. I know they started both, and Smith was 3-1 as a starter, but I think Smith is actually a downgrade. It's not huge, but is a downgrade. They were also 5-1 in one possession games last year, but that's what Creighton does. He's gonna win these close games because they're just well coached. They're always gonna be close to last in the country in penalties. Very disciplined team. They're also gonna have really good special teams this year. Those are the things that will get you a consistently good one possession record instead of just variance. So, and they have a hilariously easy home schedule. I mean, this is their home schedule: Howard, UMass, Ball State, Kent State, Akron, and Western Michigan. That's a fucking joke. So if you sweep those in Ypsilanti, you got 6 wins. They're at Jacksonville State, which is actually a really bad spot because it's right before conference play. Jacksonville State's off of a bye. But, at Jacksonville State, at Northern Illinois, at Buffalo in the finale, who knows with that game. So I think the line is about right. If I had to bet it, I would probably go under, but I have too much respect for Creighton, and this home schedule just gives them such a low floor that it's a pass for me. But I think they're a tad overvalued overall in the futures market. Same with Toledo, so it's provides a little bit of value in some of these other teams that we're going to talk about next.
I appreciate you highlighting the schedule. That home slate arguably is the best home schedule in the entire country in terms of who they're drawing. We'll go from a team that I was a little bit down on in Eastern to a team that I'm bullish on. We're going to go Northern Illinois here. 3-9 overall last year, 2-6 in conference. Win total set at 5.5. 93% of their line starts return, including all 5 starters, plus 5.5 in the TARP, 4 on D alone, 14 returning starters, and their punter. Rocky Lombardi, somehow still in college. He gets the Perry Ellis, Kansas College Basketball Award for Jesus. I can't believe you're still in college. He only played in 4 games last year, so they had some issues at quarterback, certainly. This team won every single close game in 2021 and then lost 5 one-score games in 2022. So could it be another bounce back special by this coaching staff? I think it will be. When you look at how good the offensive line can be, Ontario Brown, I love him particularly when they go Wildcat with him in the red zone. Gavin Williams, that's a nice 1-2 at running back. Travion Rudolph is a fantastic all-purpose player, gives them a huge boost in the return game. Defense could be really good by back standards if Cameron Dabney, the transfer from Kansas, is a difference maker as their second corner. And then their schedule, I look at it as, some interesting winnable games right off the bat. They're at BC. BC still has a lot of questions on offense. They're home against SIU. That should be a win against the Salukis. They're at Nebraska in year 1 of, a new coaching staff. They get Tulsa at home. And then when I look at their close, this is where I think they can pick up steam to not only go over this win total, but get potentially to the MAC title game if every single thing goes right, as it did in 2021. There's evidence, in not that far in the past that it can come together for the Huskies. Here's their close: Eastern Michigan at home, at Central, versus Ball State, versus Western, and then at Kent. That to me looks like a potential 4-1, 5-0 close if they play the way they did 2 years ago. If everybody stays healthy, if Rocky Lombardi can give them 12 starts in the regular season. I'll start with you, Stuck. I know this is one of those teams that was either a darling for people who were, riding with them in 2021, or one of the most annoying teams in the country because they just kept winning and pulling rabbits out of their hat left and right. Where are you on the Huskies?
Yeah, I despised this team 2 years ago. My only future 2 years ago was Kent State. I think 12-1, and then they ended up being favorites in the conference title game, and Northern Illinois beat them. And Northern Illinois owned me all year with their lucky wins. But the opposite was true last year. All that regression hit them. Talk about injuries. They had a walk-on freshman quarterback start the final 4 games. And they were 2-5 in one possession games to finish 3-9. Now they are 17-1 to win the MAC. So they're much more experienced. I think their D will be better. They might have arguably have the best offensive line in the MAC. Then you have Rocky Lombardi, who's been really good when he's healthy. And Lynch, that walk-on quarterback, you remember Lynch from the way back when in the day for Northern Illinois, his younger brother, he moves to running back. So you lose Tucker, another wide receiver, but you get Rudolph back. So yeah, I think that they could get another bump. Like last year, they were lucky 2 years ago, unlucky last year. Maybe it's normal. I like the over. I mean, you got to pay juice for it. It's over 5.5. I think like minus 150 you can find. I like that. And look, they draw Ohio at Kent and at Akron from the East. I think, can they start 3-6? That's not a hard ask. And if they do, which would be a bad start and disappointing, if they start 3-6, then their last 3 games, they got to, assuming that they're healthy, they say, okay, let's get to bowl eligibility. We're 3-6. We've disappointed, probably lost a couple close games. We got to beat Ball State and Western Michigan at home and then win at Kent State to get to 6 wins. So like even a bad, rough start, I think this team still will find its way to 6 wins. And I show a tad bit of value there. Wouldn't mind playing over 6 at a little plus money as well. But yeah, I think they get the bowl eligibility over team. I wouldn't hate someone taking a stab on them with Lombardi back at 17-1 or whatever you could find to win the MAC. But I went elsewhere, but I'll throw it to Ionel to get his thoughts here.
I'm not joking. I literally deleted Rocky Lombardi from like my notes, like when I was doing my like prep. Like, how is he back? I was like stunned when I thought it was like a typo. I'm like, there's no way he's still there. I'm passing on them. I think they're such a weird team. I just never have a good feel. They went from 0-6 to conference champs to 3-9. I think this is the year they finally end up middle of the pack. So I think that comes down to 5 or 6 wins. And there's a team like I just know I have no feel for them. So I stay away from them. I'm with you, Stock. I bet against them so many times in 2021, and they just shoved it up my ass every week. So they're a team I'm just like, even from a week to week standpoint, I just want nothing to do with this team.
I just love the fact it's almost like college basketball when they run like a true system, like a Princeton offense, where it's like, I know what they want to do. I know how they're going to execute. There's not a huge variance, assuming that people stay healthy. With their offensive line and running back room and Rocky Lombardi, I know that this is going to be a top 4 MAC offense if they stay healthy. And I really like his moxie in close games and the way that the coaching staff trusts them going on 4th down, the way they are in short yardage situations. I love them. I think they get to 8 wins this year. So they blow past the win total. I'm with Stuck. I would go plus money on over 6. And I'm going to go on them to, take down a Toledo team that, to me, is vulnerable from a mental standpoint where they don't always play to their expectations. I know it's a much more difficult road to get a bid out of the West, but I'm going to take a shot. I think it's priced lucratively. All right, let's look at another team in that 5 to 6 win total kind of window, and that's Ball State. They went 5-7 last year, 3-5 in the MAC. 83% of their O-line starts return. They're basically a wash in the net tarp, 11 returning starters in their punter. But they got new skill guys. They got a new quarterback. They lose. I think Paddock went to Illinois in the transfer portal, but we got some familiar G5 faces coming in their backfield. Lane Hatcher and Marquez Cooper. A lot of G5 success in their past. Great tight end room, maybe the best tight end room in all of the G5 in Hunt and Koziol. Whole front 7 is back on defense, but a brand new secondary. That's a little bit worrisome. Also, early in the year, they're going to get slapped around. They got to go to Kentucky, Georgia. They get Toledo at home, NIU on the road, and Miami. That's a tough, top half of the schedule. Indiana State, Georgia Southern, at Western, at Eastern, home against Central, at Bowling Green, and Kent. Those are the games that they could win. So, I mean, this is just a pure pass for me in terms of the new pieces that they have on offense. I don't know if the Lane Hatcher experience is going to work. I'm a believer in Cooper, particularly with this offensive line. I think he'll have a good year. But in general, there's teams I'm more interested in playing from the West. So this is the first one that I'm kind of lukewarm on. What are your thoughts, Ionello, on a team that at times, I mean, certainly during the COVID year, they had their breakout season. I don't know. It feels like they've been treading water a little bit. And sometimes it's better to bottom out and go to a new coaching staff as opposed to keep bumping up against this ceiling that seems to be 6 or 7 wins for them.
Yeah, I know it's boring, but again, I think they kind of stay right there and tread water. I give them credit for, they lose all MAC running back Carson Steele, replace him with all MAC running back Marquez Cooper. So that's a good save there. I'm with you. We've watched a lot of Lane Hatcher from, Arkansas State to Texas State and now at Ball State. And, I don't know. I think he's just kind of a guy. He's not anything special. You met the tight ends are nasty. I'll give you that. Last year they couldn't stop the run at all. And then I think I have some questions about their pass defense as well. They lose a lot in their secondary. They start the year at Kentucky, at Georgia. So, by the time you get into conference play, who knows if they even have guys left standing. And the concern with them is every single year they just tank at the end of the season. They always struggle down the stretch. Since 2015, they're 5-20 in the month of November. So, and that's basically the entire time that what's his face has been there. So that's a concern. Why can't they finish the season strong? It happens every single year. They just tank at the end of the year. So I'm gonna stay away from them as well.
You gonna continue to pile on the boys from Muncie here?
Yeah, under nothing year, but I passed. They were super young last year, so you hope some of that experience pops. But I'm not a huge Thatcher guy, although it'll be better than last year. But what do they have? Like 6 or 7 career FBS catches at wide receiver. Yes, tight end room is good. You'll see a lot of 2 tight end sets. But I'm also concerned about the right side of the offensive line. The secondary, you mentioned, they lost 4 starters who started 45 of 48 games over the last year. So they were not hurt, and they had 4 starters, only missed 3 games. They're all gone. You're relying on freshmen and transfers without experience in that secondary. Big special teams turnover second straight year. I think that could end up being an absolute disaster. And then they host a lot of the top teams in the division outside. You do host Kent State, which should be a win. You have Indiana State at home, which should be a win. I lean under, but close enough on the number where I didn't play anything. No inch. I don't see the upside with this team. And yeah, they're boring. Like, okay, let's move on.
All right, let's move on to the chips. Fire up chips. 4-8.
Drew Plitt ain't walking through that door.
That's right. Ball State is not relying on Drew Plitt these days. All right, Central Michigan, win total set at 5. 60% of their all-line starts return. Negative 3.5 in the TARP. Negative 7 on offense alone. That's bad. 13 returning starters. Here's the question. Is it the Bert Emanuel show? Is Paul Petrino really going to let it rip and just put him out there in the shotgun, let him do the read option? He killed Buffalo last year, one of the breakout performances of the entire season, 293 yards on the ground against the Bulls. They have a good O-line, and they got Marion Lukes and Miles Bailey back as a 1-2 punch at running back. The passing game, though, borderline, non-existent. The defense is solid, returns a lot of experience, 9 starters in total. The schedule early on, I think, is going to really beat them down a little bit at Michigan State, at Notre Dame, at South Alabama. Those are 3 very difficult opponents to go on the road to play. So from a win total, not interested in 5, certainly not interested in them coming out of nowhere and winning this conference. But I think September could undervalue them. If they get crushed by Notre Dame, if they get crushed by South Alabama, I think they have some interesting gimmies. They got Akron at home, but no Kent State on the schedule, which is a bit of a shame. They go to Buffalo, they go to Ohio, they got Toledo at home against NIU. I'm just going to try to buy them, if the market's too down on them, mid-season in October, and they're getting 4 or 5 points of baked in extra value. Offensively, I just don't know. I mean, it could be Emmanuel the whole way, and they could open it up and just let him run, or they could go in a different direction. So I'm not necessarily sold on this. When you look at what Petrino did in all his years with Idaho, that's not generally the way he likes to coach his offense. So this is a wait and see team for me. Am I missing anything here, Stuck? I know that Central is a team that unfortunately, lost a lot of pieces, losing things in the transfer portal. So do they lose their identity fully? And is this a team that's kind of a wait and see for you?
let's take a shot with the chips. I'm taking a shot.
Oh, boy.
30 to you can find a 30 to 1 out there. They're my pick in this division. They kind of got Miami, Ohio, and then Central Michigan. This is a team that, like, after last year, now they come in. And by the way, I think McElwain took them from winless to the MAC title game before. So really good coach. And last year, everything went wrong. Everything. I mean, they lost all their receivers and 2 NFL tackles. MAC teams don't have 2 NFL tackles. Central Michigan did, lost them both, lost their offensive line coach. And then look at the injuries last year were insane at running back, wide receiver, tight end, defensive back. It was ridiculous. They were minus $4 million in turnovers. Everything went wrong last year. And yeah, I could go through a lot of the roster. There's definitely some questions. They're young. They need some transfers to hit. But and I don't really love the schedule. They have 7 road games, and they should start 1-3, like you said. Their last 4 opponents all come off of a bye somehow. I don't know how the hell that happened. But they host the top 3 teams from the division. That's massive. And this is an Emmanuel podcast. And if he's a wild card, we saw his running ability. We don't know if he can progress as a passer or who he's throwing it to necessarily, but he's a great fit for the Petrino offense. And if he progresses a little bit with this staff, I'm buying low on the chips, who bottomed out after last year, taking a shot on CMU.
All right, so I dip my toe in. Stuckey is basically in the chips costume, flipping around the sign outside of the strip mall. Come on in. This is where the bandwagon's at. Are you also in on this team, or somebody's got to lose some games in the West, right?
Fire up chips.
Stuckey said everything I need to know. I'm the first person to admit I have a very simple, very tiny brain. And when I see something, I make an impression and it sticks, and I can't get it out of my head. We'll talk about it on the FAU podcast with Casey Thompson. But when Burt Emanuel came in the second half against Buffalo and ran for 293 yards and 3 touchdowns, my brain said Mike Vick, and it has not left my brain, especially in the maroon. He is electric. He is maybe my favorite player in college football that doesn't go to Penn State. Over the last 3 games of the season, he had 466 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He's just unbelievable. Jace Bauer is also back. He can run too. He passed a little bit more, but he wasn't really great at it. My hope, and I'm sure it's Stuckey's hope, is they give Emmanuel the full Lynn Bowden Jr. treatment. Just give him the entire offense. Let him run the ball every play. They lose Lou Nichols, so they don't really have anyone else to run the ball. I think their defense is going to be very good. Their secondary should be nasty. Dante Kent and DeJavion Stepney are both sick, so I like their defense. And they
lost every linebacker, by the way, going into last year too, and they most of them come back.
We always knock teams. You brought it up for Western Kentucky that thrive on turnovers and that they're due for regression. Well, with Central Michigan, it's the opposite, because this team got no turnovers last year. And that's something McElwain has said repeatedly, has been like their only focus of the spring is like force turnovers, get loose balls, tip drills. So they're really emphasizing that. And that screwed them last year. So I always love that when, the coach kind of sees the flaw and is working to fix it. I think McElwain's a really good coach. Stuck mentioned the quick turnaround he had. So I do trust him to right the ship. I think this is a bold team. So I'm going over 5.5 on them. I kind of wrote it down as a question mark, and I said someone convinced me to take over 5.5. Stuckey did. So here we go. Fire up chips.
All right, from McElwain, who has a ton of head coaching experience, to Western Michigan, 5-7 last year, 4-4 in conference, win total at 3.5. Lance Taylor takes over, first-time head coach at any level. He was the OC at Louisville last year. They returned 3/4 of their offensive line starts, -2.5 in the net tarp, -5 on defense alone. A lot of new faces there. 9 starters in total, plus their kicker. It's a total rebuild on defense, and it could be bad because their defense kind of kept them afloat last year. 5 starters on the offensive line have had significant starting experience at some point in their career, so that could be a strength. Both quarterback options, Salopek and Trayson Bourget, failed to hit 50% of their passes last year. Not great. And they lose their top talents in terms of playmakers. Sean Tyler and Corey Crooms both transferred to Minnesota. PJ Fleck keeping the row in the boats. Canal open from Western to Minnesota. Billy Cash comes in from Richmond, brand new air raid kind of offense as the play caller. under cash. Richmond finished in the top 25 FCS and total offense, passing efficiency. This offense will be good next year when they get the right pieces in, when they get the right playmakers, when they get the right quarterback. Because right now, I don't see the right quarterback on this roster. So it's a big fade team for me in year one. Not necessarily the 3.5. I think that's pretty accurately priced. I have them in that mid-3 range in terms of their win total. But when you look at their wins this year, or potentially winnable games, they open against St. Francis. You go in, you click that as a win. They were an FCS playoff team last year, so maybe not. And then they get Central at home, and we just talked about how much we like Central. The rest of these games, I mean, September alone, they're going to lose all their confidence. They got to go to the Carrier Dome, Iowa City, and at Toledo, 3 in a row in September. Woof. So Western's a fade team for me. I'm going to move away from the Broncos here, but kind of just keep it in mind that this is a year zero situation for Lance Taylor. What do you think, Suck?
Yeah, again, too low for me to go under, but nothing really to write home about. Their D got absolutely gutted. You lose 3 really good linebackers who started every game last year. In Sealick, Moment, and Barnes. You also lose 3 of your top defensive backs who started every game last year. They always have terrible special teams, so expect that to be the case again. Wolf's going to solve all the problems? No. I mean, you got a coaching change, bottom 15 experience with a defense which was carrying you last year that got absolutely gutted. No thanks. They also had the hardest overall schedule in the MAC by far, in my opinion. No bye. You draw Miami, Ohio, and Bowling Green from the East. You don't get to play Akron or Kent State on your schedule. And I mean, could they get to 4 wins? Sure. I have a price at like 3.35, so no value for me. They could beat St. Francis at home. You could beat Ball State at home, Bowling Green at home in the finale, and then steal another one somewhere. I think they're priced about right. This long year for Western Michigan, though. Rebuild.
Ianello?
Yeah, Calabrese, first of all, you mentioned the 2 quarterbacks who are back who both stunk last year, but you didn't even mention the real story. Matt Mitchell hit the music. Hayden Wolf from Old Dominion. Does the Wolf Pack ride again? Is the Wolf Pack riding again? No, in all seriousness, I think this team's bad. I think the defense is going to be a mess. And you guys mentioned it. For me, I actually like this under more than Kent State's under because they don't get to play Kent State and they don't get to play Akron. And you mentioned the St. Francis game, who isn't even a sure win, but even if you give it to them, who else are they beating? And Stucky, you said, they could beat this team and they could beat this team and they'd have to beat all of them. And you get that extra win to play with that you don't in the Kent State game. Depending on what book, BetMGM has a juice 3.5, which I like. There are 4.5s out there that are a lot of juice. Or plus money 3.5 at MGM, which I honestly probably like because I don't know how this team wins 4 games. They should win 1, and the MAC effect will have them win 1 or 2 more, but 3 more is a lot. So I actually like this under because I don't know who this team is beating.
All right, let's go with a Maction lightning round to close this out. Your pick to win the conference, that can be your long shot, or it can be the one that you think is most likely to actually do it, as well as the win total. I'll get it started. NIU 17-1, calling my shot. Love the offense. If Rocky Lombardi, let's call it 10 games. If you give me 10 full games and he can have a couple limp offs or, whatever situation near the end of the season when they're playing in bad weather and he's banged up, that's fine. Give me 10 starts, play the full games. They're going to get to the conference championship. I'm also going to go under on Kent State. I think they are garbage. They are the worst FBS team. And the fact that it's 2.5, I can still win with them winning 2 games. I love it. I'm going to go under on the Golden Flashes. How about you, Stuck?
Yeah, let's go 2 futures. I'll call Miami my champ, but Miami, I think there's value in them this year as long as Gabbert can stay healthy, but they have better quarterback depth this year. But if you just look at the East, I think Ohio is now a bit overvalued after last year. I'm not a fan of what Buffalo did in the offseason. Bowling Green, I think their roster and just their talent overall is a step below. Not a fan of their coaching staff either. Akron's still a year or 2 away. They're getting closer, but I don't think they have what it takes to win the MAC this year. And then Kent State's going to be one of, if not the worst team in the country. But I think Miami is the pick to come out of the East. I like their roster. I think their defense will be better. And I think all the other teams in the division are a bit overvalued. In the West, I think Toledo's overvalued. I don't trust Jason Candle as a favorite. They'll lose a couple games they shouldn't. Eastern Michigan, some of their departures and their defensive coordinator loss, I think, are going to be pretty big. I still like Chris Creighton, but they're a tad overvalued in the futures market. Northern Illinois, I could see, but I'm going to buy the upside of Central Michigan, who gets to host all the top teams. And if Manuel hits, I'll trust McElwain to do another magical turnaround job after they just got so unlucky last year in every single facet of the game. Big turnaround, fire up chips, win totals. I'll say under, Bowling Green, and Buffalo. Overs look Northern Illinois and Akron.
Yeah, I'm on Miami, Ohio to win the conference 8-1. That's my favorite future. And then my favorite win total is the Buffalo under 6.5.
All right, that's it for the Max special. A reminder to our audience that this has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast, brought to you by BetMGM. We are going through every single conference, even splitting the SEC into 2 mega episodes, East and West. That'll be Colin and Stuckey breaking it down for you. Be sure to check us out on your podcast feeds as well as YouTube. We have the full video of every single conference preview. And a reminder that all the reviews, the comments, the liking, the sharing, it all really, really helps. As Stuck likes to say, if you have a girlfriend, a friend, grab their phone, also subscribe, leave some reviews. We're going to be giving out merch and swag along the way for the best, and let's just call it what it is, probably the funniest comments that we can see. So make sure to do that in the coming weeks. And we're just around the corner from week 0. So our conference preview season starting to wind down a little bit. We're going to get into some Heisman futures talk and then right into week 0, the 7 games to start the college football season. For Mike Iannello and Stuck, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast.